Need rigs. Ace 5 Studios has rigs. Hey, and welcome back. Now, this time we're going to be going over some distribution. We're going to get this flower and we're going to put it on stuff. So, firstly, let's make a null at the center. Make sure it's underneath. Because right now, look, I think I've gone over this already. When in cloners, it's important to have the axis in the right place. So if we just select everything and we go Alt-G, you'll see that the axis of this null is not in a good place. It's in some weird place. So let's undo this, because it's just taking the average of all the objects and making the null there. So instead, we're just going to make a null here, and it's at the center, 0, 0, and then we're going to put all of this stuff in there and call this flower. Now, distributing objects on a surface is part of the fun. So let's make a plane. Let's make it a bit bigger. Let's make the flower a bit smaller, because also when you're working in stuff in any project, scale is very useful. An easy way to do that is to get this guy and make a figure. And that figure is about 2 meters tall, or 183 centimeters, which is human size. So I feel like this flower should be slightly smaller. Still be big, but maybe like this. And we don't need this figure anymore. Now let's go display garage shading lines. Now, so firstly, we're going to go through just distributing this guy on a plane. So holding the Alt key, we create a cloner. And obviously right now, it looks like it's on a plane, but it's not actually attached to the plane. So what we're going to do is we're going to go here, I'm going to switch this to object mode, and we're going to drag our plane in here. Now by default, it's set to surface, which means it just randomly arranges them along the surface. And it arranges them, they're kind of tilted. So I don't know why Cinema does this. It's kind of annoying, but basically you go transform and type in -90 here on the P thing, and then they'll be standing up. Now, so let's arrange them. By default, it's surface, but you also have vertex, which means you create one on every vertex. And if you notice, your viewport will get a bit slower potentially here. So what you can do is you can switch it to render instances, which will make it a bit faster, or multi-instances, which will make it even faster. You might ask, well, why have the other ones if this one's the fastest? Because each one of them limits the amount of things you can do with clones. When you're in instances, you can actually animate clones inside of clones and stuff, but when you go to render instances and multi-instances, you can't affect like half of these clones inside clones. They're basically making them all identical. I'll show you how this works later. But basically, if you're trying to animate something and you're using multi-instances and the effector isn't working the way you expect it to work, try going to render instances and then try going to instances. We're going to go for this project right now, we're going multi-instances because we're doing pretty basic stuff. So as you can see now, all of these are on our vertexes, and we can change this to polygon center. Or we can change this to, there's also volume for 3D objects and edges. All these we can go over later, but for now, we're just going to stick to surface. Now, and let's increase the amount of these. Now, you might notice that some of these guys are intersecting, right? Where's some intersecting? These ones, for example. Now, Cinema 4d has this useful effector over here called push apart. So let's select it. As you can see, they'll go a bit too far, and you can control the strength. But really what you want to do is you want to control the radius. Let's say the maximum radius is about 20. And they seem to have stopped intersecting. That was a good guess. But yeah, basically, it's just like a little circular radius around the original location of it. Now let's go display and garage shading. Now, as you can see, we have a whole bunch of flowers, right? Let's do something slightly more. This is just basic stuff. Obviously, we can add our random effectors. So random, let's not move the position as much because we don't need it, it's already randomly positioned. We're more about the rotation and maybe just a tiny bit here. And scale, let's hit uniform, oops. And now we have this nice field of flowers, right? Pretty convenient. Now you might ask, why do I want this on a plane? Well, that's what I'm going to answer. Now the thing is, you can clone stuff not just on planes, but on any other kind of object, as we've discovered before. So for example, let's make a sphere. Let's scale it up. And in the cloner, let's change our object to sphere. And now we'll have our flowers on a sphere. And we can adjust the sphere to be smaller, there'll be more flowers, bigger. But let's do it, let's put it on a terrain. Delete these spheres and let's make a terrain object, landscape. And let's drag them here. Now the landscape might need to be a bit bigger, a bit taller. Now, as you'll see, one of the first issues you run into is that your flowers are kind of growing sideways, which isn't very realistic if you, for example, are growing a tree. So if you want them all to be in the same direction, an easy way to do that is just go to your cloner and turn off align clone. And now they'll all be aligned to whatever the transform, to whatever the cloner was originally, except you got to remember we did this thing to turn it off. So we turn that off. There you go. Now we have the flowers just growing on a terrain. And we can control these with the regular fields. Like we can have our plane field again, and we can turn off our position. Let's go scale, and let's go uniform scale and -1. And let's go to fields, and let's add ourselves a linear field, for example. Oops, just one is enough. And now, as we move this across, you'll see they grow. Now, as you can see, there is some kind of glitching going on. Now, this glitching could be because of the multi-instance option. Maybe we should switch it to normal instance, it'll work better. It could be because it needs to be cached. Clearly not works the regular instance mode. Yeah, the regular instance mode works. But it could be also because it's just getting confused, because sometimes these effectors, they don't apply just to this cloner, they also apply to the cloners below. So you got to be careful how you build these things. You got to experiment a bit. But for now, the easiest things we can do to avoid this problem is just get this object, put him into a connect object. So find your connect object here. Make sure weld is turned off, and then just go right click on this and go current state to object. Or connect objects. And current state to object will work. There we go. And now we have this flower, and now this guy we can drag him out and just hide him. We don't need to see him. And this flower will now be in our cloner. And now we can split the cloner back to multi-instance, and our linear field should work just fine. There we go. See, beautiful. And we can also stack this with a decay effector if we want, and all kinds of stuff. And this also affects how long the fall off is, so it starts growing, or you can make it grow over a very small amount. And this can be any, you can change this to a cylinder field if you want. And if you wanted to, because right now it's basically, let's make it more obvious. Let's switch to a spherical field. Let's make it bigger. And as you can see, it'll hide wherever it is. We might want to change our inner offset, so there you go. As you can see, it hides the flowers. We can easily go in here and go invert it, and now it'll be the opposite. You'll just have flowers growing wherever your field is. And you can drag a lot of stuff into this field stuff. So for example, if we want, let's delete this. We need this field right now. Let's grab let's get our figure, scale them up. Let's move them here. Let's see if this works. Let's see if we can grow flowers on a figure. So our plane effector, drag our figure in. And that's not really working. Oh, because it's possibly hiding them, right? Our figure, see it's hiding them where it's intersecting. Let's increase the size, the radius around each polygon. And let's also go to remapping and hit invert. There you go. And now we have flowers just wherever the figure is. Super convenient. And if you hide the figure, then it just grows the flowers there. Anyway, the point is you can load meshes in to control this stuff. So if we just load a square here, or a cube, we can make it editable, we can move these guys around, and our plane will have the cube there, and if we invert it, okay, let's switch this guy to volume. There we go. And we have flowers inside. Oh, there's not that many flowers. Okay, maybe that's the issue. Let's get our cloner. Let's increase the amount of flowers. There you go. And now this cube, we have flowers growing exactly where it is. So if we extrude a bit more this way, let's extrude it. There you go, we have flowers growing there as well. Maybe let's add a display tag to this guy. I had it set, my default display tag is set to lines, so it automatically, when I put it, automatically hides it. So there you go, now you can see this cube and you can move it and you'll have stuff growing where you need. So that's all great. What do we have next? We already have the random effector there. Scale with faces. Let's quickly do this little, because basically this is the important stuff. And now we're doing more bonus stuff. That's a lot of flowers. Let's reduce that amount a bit. From here, let's grab just our flower. We'll just make a new scene. Let's grab just our cloner flowers. Flower petals. Flower object. Let's copy it into a new scene. There we go, we just have a flower object. Let's move its axis back down here, and let's delete this thing. We don't need it, we just want the flower. There you go. Now, let's go back to our plane, and NB to see the vectors, and let's make this into a cloner on object, plane, and set it to polygon center. And kind of backwards, so let's rotate them. There you go, 180. Let's make each flower a bit bigger. Now, as you can see, we now have this kind of clones on the plane. Now, we can actually get this plane and we make it editable. And then we can select, say, this polygon here. And if we move it, oops, it's on our axis. We can now move it around. You can see these guys move with it. But if we scale it, nothing really happens. They just get kind of jammed further away, right? But in this clone, there's this option called... Oh, because I'm looking at the wrong cloner. Sorry, that was set to wrong clone. This one's set to, this is the petals, this guy. There is enable scaling. And you can set it to 100%, for example, and nothing happens. But now if we grab one of these polygons and we scale it, you can see the size of the polygons affects how big the clone is on them. And it gets kind of more fun if in your scale tool, so when you're using your scale tool, you go soft selection and you enable it, and you'll see it affects a bigger section now. And now when you scale it, you can get this neat effect. So that's in itself kind of fun and works really well when you're animating things or when you just want to arrange like some kind of decorative elements on topology, and it'll make them bigger and bigger polygons and smaller polygons. So now let's go back to our previous scene. Let's get our cloner here. And let's make sure we have a lot of these guys. Now, the other way to control the clones is you can actually use the texture on an object. So if we create a new material here, let's get our, let's copy this guy. I'm not sure how it works with redshift, to be honest. Let's just use a regular material. Let's go here, create, and material, no, new standard material, this guy. With a redshift, I recommend just using this and then use the redshift one on top of it so it renders, but for the driving landscape. So basically we have this effector called a shader effector. Let's first just open it, see how it goes. So shader effector, there it is. And make sure it's in our list here. Now, this shader effector by default is just set to scale, but let's make this -1. There you go, so basically it makes it 0. So if we go to effector strength, we can see it animating them to 0. And we're going to go shading, and in here we can just load we can load a picture, or we can go, for example, to effects, and I'm going to go, no, surfaces, and I'm going to go checkerboard. And it's kind of hard to see because it's so, let's make it a bit bigger. Yours might be. There you go. And now, yeah, from the top it's more visible. So you can see that now we have these checkerboard patterns. But we're kind of guessing here, so this isn't really effective. What I suggest doing is you create this material that we did the standard one, and then load whatever you want into here. So for example, checkerboard. And let's get these guys down to 2. And if you select both of these together, and you press 2 here, and you press Control Enter, it'll apply 2 to everything else that's selected. And let's apply it to our landscape. And now we can actually visibly see it. And in the shader effector, here we choose not custom shader, we choose, for example, color. And you drag the material tag in. There you go. So now they're perfectly fitting on those objects. On the texture. And as you can see, white means 100% effect and black means 0% effect. So we can also get our shader effect and we can make it slightly less strong. And then you have these flowers. Or you can invert it, the same as any other one. This one's being affected by, this one is on a field. So, oh yeah, you can have one which is affecting it -1. Can you invert it from here? No. So anyway, this is not the best way to do it. This is an option. If you have a texture on your character, you can use, or on your whatever it is, you can use this to control stuff. If you have like a river painted or something. But actually what I would recommend is using vertex maps because they're a bit more dynamic and controllable. They do have, their resolution does depend on the mesh. So you will have to look at how dense your mesh is, unlike textures, which don't care how dense your mesh is. So there are some pros and cons to each one. But let's switch to vertex maps. So let's delete this. Let's delete our shader effector. Let's go to that landscape, right click on it, and go other tags. There it is. And vertex color. Yes. While we're here, you can actually just, if you have an object, like let's make this editable, you can actually select your polygons with the selection tool. So let's turn off the cloner for a sec. You can go, I want the flowers to be, here. And in your cloner, what you do is instead of dragging in the landscape, you just drag in, sorry, I forgot. Then you have select and you have to go store selection. I keep changing this. Yeah, so you create this a polygon selection, and then in the cloner, you just drag your polygon selection in here, and it'll clone just on that. There does seem to be another field here, which does the same thing. So, yeah, you can turn it off and on if you want. Another button to restrict the selection. Lots of ways to get the same thing. Very interesting. So anyway, yes, this is a quick way to do that. Let's delete this. Now let's go back to our tags. So right click, other tags, and vertex map. Now this vertex map can control also effectors. So we have this plane effector here, right, which scales to -1. In fields, we have a point object. Let's drag plane. Yep, let's drag our field, now vertex map into it. Now, as you can see, it has 0% effect there because it's all red. But if we get this vertex map, we can double click on it to hand paint it. So we can paint a path just like we did with the polygon selection. And we can, for example, where's our option? We can go smooth and apply all. And then we have this kind of effect. But also in this tag, you can turn on, it's like transfer, and here it's fields, but honestly this thing changes with every version, so this might be slightly different. But basically if you click on the vertex tag and go to basic, there should be something at the bottom called use fields or transfer mode or something or other. And if you click on it, you'll get a fields tab. And by default it has freeze, which means it's the stuff that was underneath selected before. But we're going to delete this. And we're going to affect this field, this vertex map with fields. So let's turn off our cloner for a second. Now, so we can add a random field, for example. And this random field, we can make the scale much bigger. And let's turn on animation speed. Now if we press play, it's not too fast. Let's make it faster. Make it too fast. There you go, it animates. So now if we turn on our cloner, you will see it's actually affecting our cloner size. But that's not all. What we can also do, we can delete this, is we can add, for example, our regular spherical field. And this field will now affect it'll affect our vertex map. And we can obviously invert the field. We can select it, remap it, we can invert it if we want. But I think in this case, we might want to make it easier to invert this whole vertex map. I know it sounds weird, but you can invert the whole vertex map instead of inverting each field, because this way you actually can control the way the effects work. So let me show you what I mean. We can't animate the size of this guy growing to get more flowers to grow on, but actually a nifty thing is we can use the freeze field that we had before here. We can put it at the bottom. Make sure the set is set to add. And this guy should be set to grow. And if we hit play, okay, we need to increase the size of this. See, we get growth from where it was. So now if we turn on our cloner, right now if we press play, it'll grow, but it'll destroy the flowers, which could be an effect you want. But we're going to do the opposite, and just on this field tag, sorry, this vertex map tag, we'll go to basic and we can invert it here. Or maybe we can invert it in our plane. Yeah, we can. There's lots of places to enable remapping. Invert. There's lots of places where you can invert. Just remember where you did it. But I wouldn't recommend inverting the individual fields, like in your tag, like the spherical field, because when you want something to grow, it goes from 0 to 1. And if you invert it, it's not going to grow because it'll be at 1 already and it can't grow backwards. So I would invert it later on, when like somewhere further down the line. So now when we press play, we have a flower growing animation. Pretty neat, right? And you can have multiple one of these, so you can go here and let's add another one. Let's put this guy. Where's our second field? There it is. I can press play, and we can have them growing from 2 sides. And if you want to go slower, just go to your freeze and change this to like 20%. And you can see it grows slowly. But let's bring it even further. Let's do a bit of simulation while we're here. Let's delete our fields. Now, freeze, we'll press clear here. Let's make a sphere and move it up here. Let's make it a bit smaller. Let's put it into a cloner. And let's right click on the cloner and go simulation and go rigged bodies. And then right click on the landscape and go simulation and collider. And now we press play. And they fall. Beautiful, right? Now, if you remember, in fields, you can actually bring geometry in it. So let's drag our cloner here. And let's set it to point object. And set it to add. And press play. And nothing works. It's the wrong order. It should be freeze then cloner. Press play. And now, as you can see, they roll down the hill, and then behind them it grows. Increase the amount of frames here. Pretty nifty, right? There you go. Education at its best. And I think that's about it for this lesson. If you have any questions, ask below. And remember, if you need any more characters, we have a bunch of stuff on ace5studios.com. All these characters are animation ready, rigged, have materials, are fully customizable, and you can use them in your own commercial projects. We also have more stuff here, like some free rigs you can try out. We have character building kits. We have packs of simpler characters for infographics and infomercials and whatever it is you're making. There's kids. There's also some animals there, so go check it out. You won't be sorry.